And for more on the election, I was joined earlier by two former senior WA politicians, Labor's Jim McGinty and Liberal Barry MacKinnon. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Jim, did the election campaign actually start here in Western Australia when Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan launched the mining tax?
I think we had a contest far earlier than that. When Tony Abbott took over the leadership of the Liberal Party, he took over what was, frankly, a rabble, and he managed to galvanise them. You then had the emissions trading scheme, the mining tax, the leadership change. I think all of those were big contributors to the local campaign.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think until Tony Abbott became the leader of the Liberal Party, we're just not in the race. I think he brought them into the race. He challenged Rudd, and I think Rudd then on the emissions trading scheme, that was the beginning of the end of Kevin Rudd, no doubt about that. And then, of course, it just compounded itself with the mining tax.
Well, of course, we haven't had anything really, have we? There has been that front page of the Australian today about the government's view on a carbon price. But still, I suppose that key issue of the mining tax is still playing out. Jim, how do you think it has played, at least in the election campaign?
I think that the original proposal helped set the scene, which was an adverse one for the Labor Party. I think the remodelled tax agreed to by the people who'll be paying it really put that issue substantially to bed. It was an issue which, when you saw Gina Rinehart up there on the back of the truck with the pearls calling out, "Greed is great, I love this, I want more, I want more," I think it just made a fool out of all of those people who were still trying to oppose the tax. I think the concept of the mining tax, of getting those people who are making windfall gains out of our resources to contribute more to the community, is very sound.
I don't agree with Jim to this extent, that I think in the eastern states of Australia the mining tax has probably not been an issue, but I still think in Western Australia, certainly from my observations, it's an issue that has some currency still today. Despite the fact, as Jim said, it probably in principle is not a bad idea, and I don't think too many would argue that, but the fact of the matter is that the way it was handled initially, I think, has left a bad taste in the mouth, and it's let the Liberal Party, of course, run a campaign saying they're all against Western Australia, which is a very underlying, strong political theme and nerve in this state. Made a difference.
And what about, Jim, the power of incumbency? I have to say that Julia Gillard's launch at the beginning of the week did remind me a little bit of Alan Carpenter's, to the extent to which there wasn't a lot of cheering about what we've done. It was a fear of sort of being, too proud, I suppose. What's the danger of a government not being able to rely on what they've done over the past 3 years?
I think there's two dimensions to incumbency in this particular election. The first is that the change in the leader in the months leading up to the election made it far more difficult to sell the message. But nonetheless, it enabled the government nonetheless to get out there and talk about things like broadband from a position of government where it was being rolled out. And I think that was arguably the most forward-thinking, positive policy that came out of this campaign. Particular resonance among young voters, and they might yet have a big influence on the outcome tomorrow.
Well, and what about, I suppose, if the young voters also vote Green?
Yeah, it could be, but to go back to the point that Jim made in terms of incumbency, I think the big mistake the Labor Party made was in terms of Gillard and her decision to go early. She should have stayed around for a good, I reckon, 4 to 6 months, so she had a track record of achievement. You could wash out all of the angst and anger that had been in there because of the way that she was dumped. Instead of that, going early, she hasn't been able to run on her record, and she can't run on Kevin Rudd's because she dumped him. So I think it's been a big mistake from Labor, and running a negative campaign when you're the incumbent is always dangerous.
And how have you both taken this negative campaign that's occurred from both sides?
I think it's been the most negative campaign I've ever seen from both sides, and I've been disappointed on both sides in not painting, despite the fact of Jim's comment about the broadband, a real vision about where we're going as a country. Kevin Rudd was able to do that last time, in my opinion, and very successfully. This campaign, it's all been negative, and that's bad in my opinion, not because I'm a Liberal, but if you're the government, not running on your record, being negative, dangerous, I think, and therefore the undecided voters, which we're now seeing out there today, I think that's a danger for the government, and they'll probably fall the other way.
A lot of undecided still here, do you think?
There are. I think Julia Gillard did very well in selling the role of her government in saving Australia from the global financial crisis. I think she pitched for the future in terms of health, education, broadband in particular. but there was too much negativity for my taste.
I think she's campaigned well, Jim. You have to say, as a campaigner, she's
both have campaigned incredibly
I think they both,
well.
but she has as well. But
Yes.
it's the style of the campaign they've run.
Yes, yes. And people want to see a vision for the future.
Yes, they do.
Is that fear, do you think?
There's been an awful lot of fear and negativity involved in this campaign.
Well, look, what about Western Australia? I'd like to come to your predictions, particularly, I suppose it's Hasluck and Swan here, which are the truly marginal seats. Canning's the other sort of big fight that's got us all interested. But, Jim, how do you see it going?
I think we're going to wake up on Sunday morning and see Tony Abbott as the Prime Minister for this reason, that the momentum seems to be with him towards the end of the campaign. I think it's quite likely that he will be Prime Minister of a minority government. It's still going to be very, very close. And if he has to rely on the three independents, then it's not going to be a very stable government, and he's going to have to deal with the Greens in the Senate, who will, no matter what the outcome of the election, will have the balance of power in the Senate. So
that'll be hard, won't it, for either side?
Yes, it will, and I agree with Jim on the outcome. I think you would have said 2 or 3 days ago, as I said at the beginning of our last interview, in fact, I thought that if the election was then the Labor Party would have won. But anything could happen in a campaign, and anything has happened in many respects, and therefore the undecided voters are out there, and if you're an incumbent government and there's still a lot of undecideds in the last 2 days, then you better get ready for opposition.
There's a lot of volatility out there we've seen throughout the course of this. Julia Gillard surged at the beginning of the campaign. Yep. Tony Abbott seems to have momentum behind him at the end, and the extent of the volatility still worries me. I presume that it is accurate.
The polling?
Yes, but to have a 3% swing in a week is pretty much unheard of in an election campaign.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll know more the next time we meet. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Eliza.